Thank you very much. Mrs. Joanna Kazana, UN resident, coordinator for Trinidad and Tobago, Aruba, Curacao, Suriname, St. Martin, multi-country office. Again, Madam Natasha Graves, I recognize you, Graves, I recognize you now as your head of the Office of IOM in Dominica. Dr. Jair Torres, Program Management Officer representing the UNDRR, here with us today. Dr. Juan Carlos Mendez, Regional Advisor for the Platform on Disaster Displacement. Dr. Natasha Motley, Organization Representative of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Commission. And of course, Major General Rodney Smart, the very hard-working and focused and intense CEO of the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management here in Trinidad and Tobago, all national stakeholders, representatives of the UN regional partners and specially invited guests, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the government and the people of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and with special greetings from the Honourable Dr. Keith Rowley, our Prime Minister, I am with more than usual pleasure to invite you or to welcome you, and warmly so, whether you are returning to us, whether you are one of us temporarily resident elsewhere, writing and reading good poetry, whether you are a first-time visitor, pleasure is mine to welcome you to this republic and to pray that you have a safe and productive, illuminating and enjoyable stay. And I am to remind you that if you have a moment to venture past the walls of the Hilton, there are some wonderful things to experience outside of here as well. Special welcome. Allow me to take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this important event for inviting me and inviting me specifically to issue some brief remarks. And having heard all that I've heard so far this morning and reflecting on what I have written here, I find myself not only learning but having to repeat some of the things that have already been said, but I think they are so critical to us in the region, they are worth and they bear repeating. I'm also heartened that the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction once again took the decision to host this regional workshop here in Trinidad and Tobago. I think the last one was right here at Hilton, if I'm not mistaken, yes. And to do so during our National Disaster Prevention and Preparedness Month, following last year's wonderful comprehensive risk management workshop. You would have heard me describe the Major General as hardworking and focused and intense. Yeah, that's how I think of him. And that is extremely important to me as a policy maker, legislator, and minister with the responsibility for peace and safety and security in this land. One of the reasons why this is so important to me, I am confident enough to say publicly that in Trinidad and Tobago we are afflicted by three, I consider, national scourges, challenges, that undermine in some ways many of the very lofty things that we plan and we think about. These are the triumvirate of productivity, or rather the lack of it, corruption, the overwhelming presence of it, everywhere sometimes. And certainly for those who are familiar with our Trinidadian lingo, the question of bacchanal, confusion, fighting, we are severely afflicted. So when I hear of all the very lofty plans and ideas and the work programs to deal with this important issue of climate change, which is not prospective anymore, it is with us, I reflect on the impediments to the application of these ideas. And this triumvirate stands in my sight. I am almost certain, I could speak for Trinidad and Tobago for sure, and I'm almost certain that in other parts of the region, you too might be afflicted with some aspects of this triumvirate. Am I correct? Yes. But I consider the Major General to be an example in my own mind of the antithesis of these challenges. He has the formula. He's always on the job. Never sidetracked by the bacchanal. He gets the business done. I think he deserves all of that. But it's not easy. And if that is the ethos, if that is the spirit that will drive our preparation for our forward thinking and our responses in this region to climate change, then I think we are all in very good hands. And I think we are. This workshop on disaster displacement, disaster risk reduction, and human security is indeed complementary to our annual exercise of heightened preparedness activities when we in Trinidad and Tobago intensify our preparations for the upcoming wet and hurricane seasons. I heard Dr. Motley say a while ago that she has had the experience, she has had sight of the community, quite apart from any interministerial team or the ODPM per se, or the institutions that are set up. But she has had evidence of people, real people on the ground in communities, taking collective action in this regard. I think that's beautiful and to be encouraged. I am encouraged to hear that. It also provides all nations present with the unique opportunity to pursue collectively a program of activities to fortify the intricacies of cross-border migrant evacuation measures to ensure the safety and well-being of all individuals within our borders during times of crisis. This is of particular relevance as the complex multi-hazard environment within which we as Caribbean small island developing states exist and exposes us to disproportionate threats and shocks. When these manifest themselves, their effects can be as much as 6 times, the experts say, more devastating in comparison to that of the developed countries. I think that has to do with resilience, the capacity for recovery based on resources and no doubt on preparation. And we are hoping, of course, to get there. More so with the increasing challenges posed by climate-related hazards, concepts such as disaster risks, displacement, and human insecurity are not merely theoretical concepts, but we've heard several times this morning, I describe them as living realities that deeply impact our region. In fact, I was reminded a moment ago that I think it was 2017 with the onslaught of Hurricane Irma. We did have some displacement from the island of Dominica. And I recall Prime Minister Manning at the time encouraging the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to open our doors to our brothers and sisters of the island of Dominica and to entertain them. In fact, the upshot of that was about 100 thereabout school children, in fact, came to Trinidad and were hosted for as long as was necessary. And that is a living experience of this business of displacement and how real it can get. In recent years, our region has experienced the profound social, economic, environmental, and cultural impacts caused by various hazards. And we have heard examples of those, including the volcanic eruption in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which occurred during another very torrid experience of COVID-19. In some way, all of the hazards that we have identified has led to some measure of internal and cross-border displacement of our people. These recurring threats hinder our developmental efforts and impede our progress towards national and regional development, and by extension, the realization of the sustainable development goals that we are all pursuing at the international level. It therefore is imperative that as a people, as a region, we must address these challenges with urgency, collectively and with resolve, and in the absence of the triumvirate that I earlier described. Can I have that last for a second? Thank you very much. Consequently, it is with these thoughts in mind that I am especially pleased to address you this morning at the launch of this two-day workshop on the ongoing joint program promoting a human security approach to disaster displacement, environmental migration, and disaster risk reduction in the Caribbean region. This program seeks to integrate resources developed for managing human mobility issues within our regional and national response mechanisms. The International Organization for Migration, in preparation for the SIDS-4 conference, highlights the need to build stakeholders' capacity in small island developing states. This is of particular significance in order to integrate human mobility across national policies and plans related to climate change, adaptation, disaster risk reduction, and development. The cross-border evacuation program, developed under the human security umbrella, is a testament to the proactive planning that we engage in. It ensures efficient coordination and aid to affected populations while addressing human security threats, as it should, by being people-centered, prevention-oriented, context-specific, and comprehensive. All of this with the aim of ensuring protection and empowerment of vulnerable people in our response efforts. To this end, I am pleased to learn that during this workshop, a tabletop simulation exercise will be conducted to test the cross-border evacuation protocols. This no doubt will ensure that stakeholders have a comprehensive understanding of the provisions therein, as activities such as these build capacity and ensure that responders are ready when called upon to act. There's precious little that is more important than training and practice, and I respect that. Here in Trinidad and Tobago, we have had our lived experiences having to respond in support of our brothers and sisters from across the Gulf in Venezuela. To this effect, our country has undertaken a notable number of globally commendable initiatives to support cross-border migration. As an example, in 2018, the government of Trinidad and Tobago conducted a massive registration exercise to document and manage the Venezuelan migrant population in what we call our migrant registration framework. Those folks would have come to our shores for several years before that, but it intensified around that period. And during this exercise, about 16,500 such migrants were registered and remain registered, as we have renewed this process on an annual basis since that time. that would have given us an opportunity to better understand what we were dealing with, the numbers we were dealing with, the demographics, and the needs, facilitating, of course, on our part, better planning and the provision of social services. In addition, on a regular basis, the Ministry of National Security collaborates with the International Organization for Migration, as well as the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, to provide support to these and other migrant populations. In fact, in that migrant registration framework, while the focus was on Venezuelans, for obvious reasons, we had extended that to all migrants who were hitherto undocumented in Trinidad and Tobago. Similarly, our country coordinates efforts to provide humanitarian assistance to migrants in need, inclusive of food, shelter, education, and medical care. And in this respect, only very recently I went to Parliament with an amendment to our immigration regulations to allow for the children of these migrants to enter and to be involved in the learning process in both our denominational and our state school system in Trinidad and Tobago, bearing in mind that prior to that, we, the government, supported, did not discourage or interfere with their entry into the denominational platform, particularly the Roman Catholic schools, prior to that development. So we, as I indicated to one international operator yesterday, we in Trinidad and Tobago have really done the business as it relates to migrants. And for that, as minister, as citizen, I feel very, very proud of our record in this regard. We don't have the migrants in no tents, no place. They are free to circulate in the society to find work. We allow them work permits, and they all enjoy the protection of the law and the Constitution in Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, many have gone to the Constitutional Court seeking their constitutional rights in Trinidad and Tobago, and we are proud of that fact, because we operate on a triumvirate again of policies in this regard. We say that we understand and accept that governments, including Trinidad and Tobago, ought to make conditions at home such that our citizens will stay here, work here, grow here, contribute here quite comfortably without the need to go anyplace else. If for any reason citizens move from their state to another as migrants, then the receiving state has a duty, an obligation to ensure that they are protected and that they enjoy the full panoply, the benefits of the law and the Constitution in the receiving state. And the third element for us is that where persons are not entitled or exclude themselves for some reason or the other from such protection, we will treat with that as is required. So, all of that said, I would want to approach a conclusion to asking us to reaffirm our commitment to building a more resilient and secure future for the Caribbean region. We have had good reason to observe, and COVID-19 was the latest of that. In that regard, we have to do for ourselves. We have to prepare for ourselves. We have to share what we have, and we appreciate what the rest of the world shares with us. But to reaffirm our commitment to building a more resilient and secure future for our people must be our highest priority. Undoubtedly, by collaborating and cooperating, we can overcome the challenges posed by climate change, disaster displacement, and reduce our vulnerability to the hazards that they offer. Of course, there are other challenges facing us. We have issues in the region with guns and drugs and such like, but those are matters for other forums, though the principle of collaboration and advanced planning are equally applicable. So I thank you for the courtesy of your attention, and I pray that your two-day workshop will be very powerfully beneficial to each and every one of you as you work as individuals, as professionals, to making our region a safer and more secure space. I thank you.